One day, the ruler of the Murakami province receives a warning from a neighboring feudal lord who has decided to seize a mountain to build a castle there. However, Lord Murakami orders the messenger to be killed and prepares to defend the village. Sometime later, the mountain is besieged by the neighbor's army, confident in victory and mocking the lord, whose face is hidden behind a mask. He sends his soldiers into battle, but the small group led by the lord standing before them extends their hands forward, and the entire army falls, destroyed by an unknown weapon that literally pierces their bodies. Present day. At a university, a group of students studying paranormal abilities gathers. One of them, Yoji Minami Maru, nicknamed Nanmaru, possesses a small supernatural power, the ability to create tiny holes in everything, which he demonstrates on a stack of paper. The young people are impressed by his skill, but Nanmaru himself doesn't consider it useful since he can't even find a job. Just then he receives a summons from Professor Murakami and heads to the Department of History and Folklore, where he meets lecturer Emi, who is worried about the professor's absence. Murakami had gone on a research trip and disappeared. The woman is surprised by the boy's last name and asks about his family, but he can't recall anything of interest. Meanwhile, in the town of Marukawa, located on Mount Murakami, a girl named Sachiko wakes up from a nightmare. Her grandmother brings her milk and tries to calm her down. Back at the Paranormal Enthusiasts Club, there's a disagreement, and one of the boys remarks on the uselessness of Nanmaru's ability. The boy gets upset and recalls how his grandfather taught him to punch tiny holes in objects by shouting, believing his grandson was special. At this moment, he is found by student Emi, Tagai. The thing is, Emi, while researching his genealogy, discovered a common ancestor in the boy's family and the professor's. She asked Nanmaru to help search for him, as the last case Murakami studied was the murder of their ancestor. The boy's parents can't help since their family moved away from there a long time ago. In the morning, they show him a model of the village made by Tagai, and Emi tells an ancient legend in which Nanmaru's ancestor betrayed Lord Murakami, leading to his death in battle. However, the professor found a written account that during the battle, all the enemies perished, with only one person on Murakami's side. And 10 days later, a festival took place on this spot, which would be very strange if the residents had betrayed and killed their lord. Tagai draws everyone's attention to the shape of the mountains around the village, as if they were artificially created. But who could have done such a thing back then? Later, Nanmaru demonstrates his ability to his new friends, which greatly impresses them. Meanwhile, in the town of Marukawa, an official notices a strange black circle on a window pane. He reaches out, and his hand seems to be cut off, and then the man's head splits, as if struck by a spherical object. At the university, Emi asks Nanmaru to show his ability, and tells him that the professor also learned to punch holes in objects before he disappeared. However, they were much larger. At this point, the boy suggests that the ability might have come from their common ancestor. At that moment, everyone hears the news about the murder of the official in Marukawa. Nanmaru suggests they search for the professor themselves. The action returns to medieval times. Lord Murakami vows not to let anyone invade his lands. His fingers begin to extend, and strange round marks appear on his wrists. Present day. The students, along with Emi, arrive in Marukawa and begin searching for the professor, but no one has seen him. However, the young people find armor with round holes in the local museum, and on the local lord's banner, they notice the image of a magpie, a human hand, and a circle, the meaning of which no one knows. They discover that after Minami Maru's death, his lord gave his youngest son to his family so the lineage would not die out. So Nanmaru is a descendant of the lord himself. They question people on the street, but no one has seen the professor. Soon the students find the building where the murder occurred and for the first time wonder if Nanmaru's ability could punch through window glass. At a cafe, the group learns about the upcoming Tanabata festival. The men sitting at a nearby table suddenly mention that the professor's presence will make the festival unforgettable and lead to the lord's revival. Tagai asks questions, but the men pretend to know nothing about the professor. Then they hear Nanmaru's name and become excited. Later, the friends joke about how the locals consider Nanmaru to be the lord and practically worship him. Emi reminds them that Tanabata is Japan's Day of Lovers, celebrated on July 7th. On this night, the stars Vega in the constellation Lyra and Altair in the constellation Aquila, separated by the Milky Way, come closest, and the magpie lays a bridge between them. But what do these facts reveal? The next day, the group goes to the mountain where the festival will take place and finds 7 strangely shaped stones standing in the middle of a clearing. Later, Sachiko visits Nanmaru, wanting to see the boy's abilities. He punches a can, but it seems that the girl expected something different. In the evening, Emi suggests returning to Tokyo because she doesn't trust the locals. Meanwhile, the hotel owner makes a phone call, reporting that Nanmaru can make holes in objects. The next day, a young man whom Sachiko calls her brother and clearly fears enters her home, but the grandmother asks him to leave and never return. Nanmaru meanwhile goes to the cafe, and the owner reminds him that this village is his real home. The boy asks Sachiko to explain her comment about the man who can achieve, and she arranges to meet him. In the evening, the girl explains that in the town, two types of people with superpowers are born: achievers and window openers. There are only 5 of the former, including Nanmaru, but the latter are those worthy of becoming priests of Mount Murakami. The boy doesn't understand what's so exciting about this since the hole is so small, but the girl abruptly cuts him off. She just wants to live a normal life. After all, she is a window opener. Meanwhile, Sachiko's brother Takashi is walking among people and encounters some local guys. Emi notices a strange glow over the mountain. She and Tagai head there and see a group of people in white robes, dancing with torches in a clearing, summoning someone. Meanwhile, the guys beat Takashi and, pulling off his hat, see a stone embedded in his forehead. They leave him on the road. Emi and Tagai sneak closer to the dancers and see a masked man performing some kind of ritual. After the people leave, the pair approach the stones and realize there are only 6. It means that each day of the festival, 1 stone will disappear. At this moment, Takashi raises his hands and his attackers lose their legs. Another group of people in white arrives at the mountain. Meanwhile, a newspaper article is published about the outrage of local residents protesting the construction of a golf course on the mountain's peak, as this place is sacred to them. At this time, the people in white capture Emi and Tagai, but she shouts the professor's name, and one of the men uncovers his face. It turns out to be the village head, who led the Tanabata ritual passed down through generations in the Murakami family. They apologize and ask her to describe what she saw. Emi recounts the first group that had already been there. Returning to town, she asks the students to leave while she stays to find the professor, as she is sure he is alive. In the morning, Nanmaru says goodbye to Sachiko and exchanges emails with her. Later, Emi sees the students off just as Takashi arrives at the hotel and realizes that the boy has left. Noticing that the hotel owner is making a call, he smashes the phone. He finds out the boy's address in Tokyo and leaves. He later finds Nanmaru at the club and begins teaching him how to use his power. He raises his hands and a sphere grows between his palms, which he calls a sphere beyond reality. It can easily dismember a person or another object. Nanmaru follows his advice and creates his first sphere. Seeing its size, Takashi runs for water and, trying to pour it over the sphere, breaks the bucket. He then convinces the boy that they are chosen. All of this is witnessed by Nanmaru's classmate, Aki. Later, Nanmaru writes to Sachiko, and she advises him to stay away from her brother. At the cafe in Marakawa, unknown men in black suits arrive, which the owner immediately reports to the town leader. He orders everyone to keep their mouths shut. On the same day, the professor calls Emi, apologizes, and tells her that his window has opened. He assures her that he didn't kill anyone and says goodbye to her. In Tokyo, a meeting takes place with a politician who wants to run for a higher office. While he is speaking to the assembled crowd, a man with a masked face enters the university building and places his long-fingered hands against the wall. Suddenly, a huge black sphere appears on stage, right in front of the politician. The man reaches out to it, and his body is immediately sliced in half. Meanwhile, Emi returns to Tokyo, and Nanmaru demonstrates his new abilities, which frightens his friends. After all, this is how the murder in Marakawa happened. That night, Sachiko visits her grandfather, who has round marks on his arms and a stone grows in his forehead. Meanwhile, the person who ordered the politician's murder, known as the Baron, watches the footage of the event and praises his subordinate for coming up with such a way to dispose of an undesirable person, but the murder in Marakawa was unnecessary. Therefore, he needs someone more obedient. That morning, Takashi comes to Nanmaru again to suggest that he participate in a project to train people in superpowers. A significant number of people attend this paid seminar. Under Takashi's guidance, Nanmaru demonstrates his power by smashing a metal statue. This causes unprecedented excitement among the audience. Nanmaru himself is delighted with the fee he received, unaware that Takashi and his accomplice, host Yokihara, earned hundreds of times more. The guys discuss Nanmaru's foolishness, not noticing that Aki is recording their conversation. That evening, the Baron is informed that one of the achievers lives in Tokyo. Meanwhile, Nanmaru notices a strange growth on his forehead. At the same time, Emi continues studying the professor's papers and suddenly seems to see him. Murakami reminds her that Tanabata was first celebrated on April 29th, and so it has always been, but it's already May now. Emi rushes to check the records and realizes that the dates have changed. In the Western Gregorian calendar they coincide, including the very first, but this calendar was only introduced in 1582, and only in Catholic countries. But how could it have appeared in Morikawa? Meanwhile, Nanmaru continues participating in seminars, supposedly teaching people superpowers. The boy tries to explain that not everyone can do this, but no one believes him. Then Aki lets him listen to the recording she made. Nanmaru refuses to participate in the seminars, explaining that his power is not meant for deceit. Meanwhile, in Morikawa, Sachiko meets a masked man at her mother's grave, whom she calls Lord Yoriyuki Murakami. At the evening gathering, the town leader reports to Sachiko's grandfather about a group of outsiders looking for achievers in their town. He reminds them of the rules: no one should know the village's secret. The next day, Yoriyuki is brought to the Baron. The achiever demands that the village be left alone, but the Baron claps his hands and 4 armed men run out of the neighboring rooms. However, Yoriyuki is much faster, and all fall with pierced heads. He agrees to work temporarily for the Baron and removes the mask from his face. The Baron is horrified to see a completely inhuman face. Meanwhile, Nanmaru continues to look for a job where he could properly use his power. Suddenly, he hears calls for help. Passers-by have found a child in a locked car. They locate the mother, but she has lost her keys and cannot open the vehicle. Seeing the boy losing consciousness from the heat, Nanmaru uses his powers to smash the car's window. People are impressed, and the mother thanks the savior. Later, he sees a news report about the incident, but these same shots catch the attention of Takashi in Yokihara. They begin vandalizing the signs of establishments with problems. TV reports about them start to appear, raising social issues. Everyone discusses the unknown boy, whom they nickname Chisel. The police start an investigation. The Baron is displeased with the commotion, but Yoriyuki assures him that he knows who is responsible. Meanwhile, in Morikawa, people believe that Takashi is behind all this. Sachiko's grandfather and the professor ask the girl to go to Tokyo. Following his friend's advice, Nanmaru decides to become a janitor, thinking he could simply destroy the trash. However, the group soon notices that the mark on his forehead grows with each use of his power. One day, Sachiko arrives in Tokyo. She confesses to Emi that the town lied. The professor was there all along. Now he hands his assistant a letter of apology through Sachiko. She explains that all the town's residents have been having nightmares. Their conversation is interrupted by Nanmaru's arrival. The girl notices the mark on his forehead, but the boy doesn't understand her hints. He points out the place where Takashi might be. At another seminar where Takashi continues to deceive people, a delegation from the town arrives and demands that these activities stop. Takashi, pointing at Nanmaru, accuses the boy of wanting to monopolize the gift, and no matter how much Nanmaru yells trying to explain the truth, people don't listen. Then Sachiko steps forward. She accuses her brother of lying and calls him a killer. Takashi raises his hands as if preparing to create a sphere, but at that moment a loud pop is heard and a huge hole appears in the window. Yoriyuki, standing below, calls Takashi to him and the latter runs down. He orders Takashi to stop deceiving people, but the seminar attendees don't want that, so Yoriyuki instantly creates a massive sphere and blows off part of the roof. He explains that no one can develop this gift, even after thousands of years of training, and shows his hands. But upon noticing Nanmaru, he suddenly declares that the boy must be erased. Sachiko shields him with her body, and the blow strikes the ground. Later, the townspeople explain to Nanmaru that Yoriyuki Murakami would have been the ruler of the settlement in ancient times. Now he eliminates disobedient telekinetics. That's why he took Takashi away. Uncontrolled power is a threat to the village's existence. Nanmaru doesn't understand. Hasn't anyone ever used the gift for good? But he is abruptly cut off. Later, Sachiko and Nanmaru have dinner together, and he shows her Tokyo at night. Nanmaru receives his first job order for trash removal. That night, Sachiko asks for permission to stay with him. She explains that the village residents fear the dark side of the gift and shows Nanmaru her back, scarred and disfigured. The girl also shows him a family photo that includes Yoriyuki, who once looked like a normal person and loved her mother. However, according to village customs, the girl was married off to another. Her father couldn't accept that his children exhibited a weak power, constantly harassing his son and forcing him to train. Her mother, tired of the constant strife, asked Yoriyuki, who had become the mountain's priest, for help. He began training Takashi, who eventually created his first sphere. The boy started visiting the priest frequently, which didn't please his father. After gaining his gift, Takashi became aggressive and took out his anger on his little sister. When everyone was on the verge of breaking down, Sachiko began having dreams. One day she overheard an argument between her father and Takashi in the garden and caught her brother standing over her father's bloodied body. Takashi insisted he didn't do it, but their mother expelled him from the house. The grandfather and the village residents covered up the incident. One day, her mother went to the mountain, asking the girl to bring Yoriyuki, who had already lost his human form. On the way, she talked about her nightmares, but he confessed that everyone saw them. They reached the mountain, where her mother left this world. Afterward, Yoriyuki left the village, only returning when he learned that a developer wanted to desecrate the mountain. Takashi wouldn't have been able to do it, being too small-minded and self-centered. She's glad that Nanmaru sees the gift in a positive light. Meanwhile, the police start investigating the disappearance of their officers. One detective constantly recalls the incident on stage and meets Aki, who insists that the spatial sphere is no mere trick. Suddenly, Nanmaru suggests to his friends that they shut down the project, believing the gift is too great for mere trash removal. Later, he goes to see Emmy, who tells him that she found a few strange phrases about the solar years in the professor's letter. She compared the facts and realized that the village used a solar, not a Gregorian, calendar. During the festival, the solstice was always present. Thus, the Tanabata festival lasted 3 days before the solstice, 1 day during it, and 3 days after. Nanmaru later takes a job with a cleaning company. Meanwhile, Aki suggests that the detective team up with her to investigate the unexplained incidents. That night, Nanmaru has his first nightmare, where he falls into a void. Suddenly, he hears Sachiko screaming, begging him not to approach the other side. Ahead, he sees an opening door and wakes up. The next day, a car, a boat, and a plane disappear in the city. Aki and the detective track down Yoriyuki, who arrives to meet Takashi and warn him about the danger of opening windows. However, Aki and the detective are caught by the Baron's men. Yoriyuki then demonstrates the disappearance of a prominent politician right at the door of a nearby building. The guards drag in the bound Aki and the detective, but Yoriyuki leaves, not considering them important. Meanwhile, Nanmaru starts work, clearing old items from an office. Suddenly, he realizes that these items were precious to someone and have a history. He runs to the roof where the others are working and asks for permission to leave some things in the building. His co-worker agrees and begins asking Nanmaru about his abilities. At that moment, they see a massive sphere floating above the city. The next moment, it bursts and erases several buildings. It turns out Yoriyuki is doing this a few blocks away. Seeing the explosion, people mistake it for a terrorist attack. Panic ensues. Nanmaru runs with everyone else and suddenly finds himself in a field strewn with the bodies of medieval warriors. But before he can be scared, he returns to his time. Yoriyuki tells Takashi that he will soon put an end to the nightmares. Meanwhile, in the village, Sachiko hears an announcement about the disappearance of 200 people in the destroyed buildings. Her grandmother doesn't believe Yoriyuki did it. After all, he was the protector of the people, but many eyewitnesses saw the massive black sphere and no one else possesses such power. Sachiko asks her mother for help. Nanmaru continues having nightmares, where Sachiko begs him not to approach the windows, or else he will find himself on the other side. The next day, the government declares a quarantine and asks everyone to stay home. Meanwhile, in the village, people discuss the events, not believing that their Yoriyuki could have done such a thing. Meanwhile, the detective regains consciousness and finds that they are in some basement. Sachiko's grandfather contacts Emmy, after which she decides to go to Markawa. Nanmaru finds Takashi in his room. He accuses him of killing people, but Takashi explains that Yoriyuki wants to end the nightmares. He suddenly asks the boy to do him a favor and convey his apologies to Sachiko. Nanmaru admits that his sister doesn't consider him a killer, and that turns out to be the most important thing for him. At the same time, Yoriyuki decides to break off the deal with the Baron and informs his bodyguard. Before leaving, Takashi gives Nanmaru a piece of paper with the address and plan of the place where Aki and the detective are being held. He goes there and arrives just as one of the bodyguards forces the detective to shoot Aki. But then the Baron calls, ordering him to come immediately. Nanmaru distracts the remaining guard by creating a sphere and tries to free the captives. However, there is another guard who points a weapon at him. The detective tries to interfere and the gun falls, wounding the guard. The men struggle and Nanmaru creates a sphere, preparing to send it at the guard. But Aki screams, the boy comes to his senses and he breaks through the wall. He frees the captives and leads them out. Later, he notices that the stone in his forehead has grown and realizes that he almost killed someone recently. Meanwhile, Yoriyuki tells the Baron that he needs to experiment with the sphere's precision and flight range. After he leaves, the Baron realizes the danger of the monster and plans to go to the Prime Minister. But at that moment, the city center is engulfed by a giant sphere and a massive hole in the ground appears where the building stood. The next day, all channels broadcast news of the deaths of people in the newly formed craters. The government urges residents to stay home. However, Nanmaru goes to meet his friends, who are joined by Aki. Namaru recalls Yoriyuki's words about getting rid of the nightmare and promises to go all the way to find out what he meant. Gathering together, the group heads to Marikawa, where they are met by Sachiko and a delegation of locals. Namaru recounts Yoriyuki's words about the nightmares, but none of the locals hurry to explain. Emi then sternly urges them to avoid another incident with the loss of lives. She wants to know what the windows are, why the Tanabata festival is needed, and what the role of the mountain priest is. However, the villagers admit that they don't understand Yoriyuki's plan. Namaru loses his temper. He respects the town's customs, but the power of the mountain kills, and Yoriyuki is a killer. The town leader promises to introduce the group to the master, Sachiko's grandfather. He also plans to invite Professor Murakami to the meeting. In the morning, Yoriyuki and Takashi arrive at the master's estate. The maid greets the guests and rushes to warn the master of the unexpected visitors. The old man immediately accuses Yoriyuki of killing the official, but Yoriyuki reminds him that the man wanted to destroy the sacred mountain by turning it into a golf course. Yoriyuki has found answers to his questions and is ready to break the rules. The pair are about to leave, but suddenly the visitor stops. He senses armed men hiding in the yard and prepares to fight. The Baron's men open fire, but the bullets don't touch Yoriyuki. The maid rushes to her master. Meanwhile, Nanmaru's group walks along the road leading to the estate. Sachiko tells Nanmaru that the locals fear him. Deep down, they are vassals. The town leader thanks Tagai for the model of their area, saying the professor told him it helped solve the problem. At this time, in the master's house, Yoriyuki distributes the exits to attack the enemy from different sides. Meanwhile, soldiers burst into the master's bedroom and open fire. Yoriyuki tears them apart with a sphere. Namaru's friends hear the shots and run to the estate. The Baron's assistant brings in reserve troops and orders the estate to be surrounded. Yoriyuki and Takashi are caught in a circle. They stand back to back, grow spheres, and kill the soldiers. Yoriyuki creates a whole bunch of spheres. One of the soldiers, dying, shoots Takashi. When Nanmaru's group arrives at the estate, they find a pile of bodies. The old master, dying, orders them to stop Yoriyuki. Namaru and Sachiko step into the yard as the Baron's men leave the estate. Yoriyuki is leading the wounded Takashi along a forest path, but the boy is getting worse. Eventually, he falls and dies. Namaru and Sachiko also find the forest path and soon see Takashi's body. Sachiko takes her brother's death hard. Meanwhile, Emi finds a handprint on the door with long fingers, belonging, according to legend, to the monster Kasasagi. Later, the group returns to the town, where they are unexpectedly stopped by Sachiko's grandmother, who asks Nanmaru to go with her, as she received an order from the new master, Professor Murakami, to protect the boy. He ends up at Sachiko's house. In the evening, the young people meet on the veranda. Sachiko asks him to be careful and offers sweet sake, which helps with nightmares. She believes that the dead turn into stars in the sky. The distance between them is vast. No matter how much you scream, no one will hear you, and the loneliest thing is your own death when you are the only one stepping out of the window. The girl talks about her nightmares where she is searching for someone. Unexpectedly, she finds herself on a mountain where she feels the presence of someone beyond the Milky Way, and they extend a hand to her. Namaru grabs her hand and confesses that Takashi regretted his behavior. Sachiko, however, hopes that her brother did not go into the darkness alone. That night, Emi struggles to sleep, replaying everything that happened in her mind. The next day, despite the police's order to stay indoors, the men of Marikawa arrange a meeting, not noticing that Aki is recording their conversation, which he later shows to Emi. The friends discover that there are no news reports anywhere about the massacre in the town and decide to go to the meeting. Meanwhile, the police knock on Sachiko's grandmother's door, searching for Nanmaru, but the girl leads him out through the back door. However, Nanmaru is convinced that the police are looking for Yoriyuki. In the evening, the residents on their way to the meeting are stopped by the police. A confrontation ensues, which Emi and her students observe. Then the Baron's men arrive, also seeking to capture Yoriyuki, but the residents refuse to hand over their priest. The Baron's assistant fires a shot over their heads, claiming that Yoriyuki possesses a terrifying power that could destroy the planet. At this point, Nanmaru intervenes, suggesting they meet with Yoriyuki first to let him explain his actions. When people start shouting again, he creates a sphere. Nanmaru admits that he doesn't know why he has such abilities, but there can be no talk of betrayal by the town. Then Professor Murakami steps out from the crowd. Emi is horrified to see the enormous stone in his forehead and faints. Namaru is at a city council meeting. He asks them to agree that he will convince Yoriyuki to talk to the police and the Baron's men. Guards will wait for him on the mountain to persuade him to leave the town without harming its residents. Later, he informs his friends that the professor wants to meet with them in his laboratory. In the morning, the team goes to Murakami. They gather around the model, and the professor begins his explanation. The village festival was established and held for 7 days during Tanabata, the summer solstice. In Chinese history, from which this festival originated, it symbolized a magpie that bridged the Milky Way. It was also on the Lord's flag, but it turns out that magpies didn't exist in Japan at that time, so it must have been something similar. The professor asks Tagai to help him, smears his hand with ink, and asks him to make a handprint. He then shows Yoriyuki's handprint left at the master's estate and aligns them in a specific order. The group immediately recalls the Lord's emblem in the Morikawa Museum. It looks as though a long-fingered hand is passing a sphere to a human hand. The professor asks them to look at the model. Tagai immediately notices that the mountains seem artificial and that Tanabata takes place on the solstice days when a second sunset can be seen. Murakami simulates the sunset during the solstice, and the group is surprised to see 2 hands and a black sphere between them in the mountainous landscape. The professor marvels at the unknown master's creation, an enormous earth sculpture spanning several kilometers. One might consider that it was created by the Kasasagi, who appeared in this area, perhaps from the sky. How would people have reacted to this? After all, according to the peasants' beliefs, the entire land was inhabited by gods, and they couldn't always distinguish between good and evil. The Kasasagi, who became gods to them, began visiting this planet regularly, as mentioned in many tales and legends. And if you look at Mount Murakami, you can see that it resembles a helicopter landing pad, so the festival torches served as guiding lights. The festival itself began as a ceremony to welcome the gods during the summer solstice, but at some point the Kasasagi stopped appearing. Yet for thousands of years people continued to meet them, even though they never came. However, the town became trapped in its beliefs. Invisible chains keep the initiates in one place. Fear and loneliness are what lie beyond the window, and the window openers have to wait for the Kasasagi. The professor and Sachiko are among those the visitors learned to reach thousands of years ago, using their minds. The large flag on the mountain most likely symbolizes loyalty and a reminder that one should not leave this earth. For this, fear is instilled in the window openers. That's why the locals have protected this mountain for every era. It's hard to believe, but it's unknown whether the Kasasagi will ever return. They may have died long ago. The next morning, the guards on the mountain come out for breakfast, and later Emi and her students arrive. The professor is concerned about their well-being and suggests they all go to the city, but Nanmaru refuses. He feels obligated to be the first to meet Yoriyuki. Murakami supports his decision as the townspeople need protection. Each generation of priests has ingrained the sacred duty into their minds, but the professor is the only one who thought to create a model and can now visually show people what is really happening here. They light bonfires to show Yoriyuki that there are people here. After all, he most likely wants to destroy the mountain. That would end everything, but the people are becoming hostages. In the evening, the students and Nanmaru go on watch. The boy asks Sachiko about her dreams and suggests they leave this place to start a new life. Moreover, he feels something for her. At that moment, the Baron's men appear. They haven't waited for Yoriyuki and demand to know where he is, otherwise they'll start killing the townspeople. The professor is outraged and even creates a sphere, but then one of the Baron's soldiers shoots his comrades and removes his helmet, revealing himself to be Yoriyuki. Those who haven't seen his form before scream in fear. The Baron's assistant tries to shoot him and immediately dies from a sphere. Yoriyuki admits that he always imagined the black sphere as a trash chute. He simply pushed those who posed a threat to the village into it, but now he doubts that. The ancestors, the Kasasagi, might have contacted their descendants many times, but most of them didn't develop the ability to leave with them unharmed. He believes that his ancestors were from other stars. They possessed knowledge and logic foreign to Earthlings, but what if it's not a window but a gate? And by entering the sphere, you can be transported to the ancestors' planet? That's why he changed his plans. At that moment, people see a huge black sphere above their heads. Yoriyuki announces that he intends to leave with the Kasasagi. Sachiko suddenly asks him to take her with him. The dark world is calling to her, and she wants to find peace. Nanmaru reminds her of her dreams. The girl reaches out, and through the darkness, she sees an inhuman hand beckoning her from another reality. But just as she is about to grasp it, Nanmaru grabs her wrist. Yoriyuki shakes his head. Nanmaru will never understand the feelings of the window openers. The boy agrees, but he doesn't like that the girl is ready to go into the afterlife without experiencing even a small part of this vast world. Here there is wisdom, mistakes, and attempts to start over. The world is thousands of years old, and compared to that, all superpowers are insignificant. He doesn't want her to leave and asks her to stay. The girl agrees. She remembers how her mother once left for the sphere. Yoriyuki also recalls that moment and promises to wait for her. The sphere begins to grow, and Nanmaru orders everyone to run. The people rush down the mountain while Yoriyuki stands under the sphere, waiting for it to consume him. A massive explosion occurs. Nanmaru's team manages to take cover in the forest, and the town's electricity goes out. Time passes. Tagai enrolls in graduate school. Emi and Murakami resign from the department and now live together in Marikawa. Aki has become an independent internet journalist and now lives with the former policeman. The people of Marikawa quickly reconstructed the area where the mountain once stood. Nanmaru has opened a company where people exchange items without using money. It's strange but highly successful. He no longer uses his abilities, which means his appearance will remain unchanged. One day he goes to Marikawa, where a festival is scheduled to take place in the evening. After all, the festival continues in the hope that someone will come from the Milky Way, and Sachiko lives in her house, always waiting for Nanmaru. The series is based on the manga by Hitoshi Iwaki, the author of the famous Parasite. While the middle of the plot may drag a bit, the finale ties everything together and thoroughly explains the events on screen, which is a rare feat in modern cinema. Sunny Atlanta. The 13th day of quarantine in the city is on the brink of extinction. Panic and horror surround those who have managed to survive. No one understands how it will all end, but how did it all begin? 2 weeks before the current events. An ordinary day in Atlanta does not portend anything unusual. The city is bustling with life. Elementary school teacher, Caddy Frank, brings her students on a field trip to the local hospital. At the same time, on one of the floors of the clinic, Dr. Sanders finds herself in quarantine due to an unknown illness. The woman remembers that shortly before the first symptoms appeared, she had contact with a patient from Syria who was sick. In another part of the city, Jenna also feels unwell, but not because of the virus. She is anxious about moving in with her boyfriend Alex. At the last moment, Jenna backs out and confesses to a cop that she is not ready to rush. Alex is unable to sort things out with his girlfriend because he is called to the department. There, a major meeting is being planned, where the police are asked to prepare for a difficult situation in the city. There is a suspicion that the Syrian brought an unknown virus to Atlanta, and quarantine may need to be declared. Dr. Sabina Lomers speaks to the police officers. She also talks about the threat of an epidemic, but assures the audience that nothing serious is happening. Another main character who will face difficult trials is Teresa. The pregnant woman visits her mother's shop, where her mother reminds her that she is expected at the adoption agency, which is looking for parents for her daughter. The reminder upsets Teresa, but her boyfriend reassures her and assures her that he has everything under control. They will run away tonight, and no one will be able to take their child. Caddy's students perform for the patients, but the teacher is concerned about why Dr. Sanders did not meet them. The doctor on duty pretends not to know about the colleague's fate and does not tell the teacher about the infected doctor's condition. Caddy begins to suspect something strange is happening soon. When they were about to leave, the doctors announce that the children will have to stay a little longer. The hospital is under quarantine and everyone must undergo a thorough check. Dr. Lorms arranges a secret meeting with Alex and asks him to take the situation under personal control. She admits that she has extensive experience but has never encountered such a virus before. According to the expert, the danger threatens not only Atlanta but the entire world. On-call officers are sent to the Zero patient's home, from where the doctors believe the epidemic began. Cops protect themselves as much as possible with shields and gloves and convince the patient's relatives that they should also take safety measures. The boy is in serious condition and is taken to the hospital despite his attempt to escape. Caddy realizes that her son and his friend Thomas have run away. The teacher goes in search of the boys just as the Zero patient is being brought in. The woman notices the patient but refuses to leave the corridor until her students are found. Officer Jake Riley volunteers to help Caddy. Together they search for the missing boys, and the pair witnesses an even more terrifying sight: the bodies of Dr. Sanders and her fiancé. Fresh news reports indicate that the situation has worsened. The Zero patient died after a severe period. The cops also learn about what happened to Dr. Sanders. But more frightening to the police is the fact that all the emigrants' relatives were also infected. This means the virus spreads very quickly and kills the host within 48 hours. Caddy finds the boys in a rat lab. It seems the danger is over, but the doctor informs her that the quarantine is extended for 2 days and no one will be able to leave the hospital earlier. During the report, Dr. Connor informs the police that they have identified the virus. He assures them that traces of the pathogen were found in the Zero patient's personal belongings, and it all looks like an attempt to deliberately cause an infection. Teresa arrives at the train station to leave for her boyfriend's relatives. But unexpectedly, the train refuses to take new passengers and passes by. Upon learning that Jake is locked in the hospital, Alex directly asks Dr. Lorms about what is happening. The expert admits that a border is being established around the area that cannot be crossed for several days. By evening, panic begins in the city. People are surrounded by an iron fence, and many find themselves separated from their loved ones. Teresa learns that she and Xander are also on opposite sides of the cordon, and the girl will have to decide what to do next. Despite the measures taken, the number of infected continues to grow. At night, experts conduct an autopsy on the Zero patient and discover that the virus affects all vital organs. Furthermore, there is evidence that it takes only 48 hours from infection to the end. There is no chance of recovery, and if a vaccine is not found soon, the world faces serious trouble. Alex manages to contact Jenna and asks her to stay in a safe place. The girl decides to lock herself in her office. Returning to her mother's shop, Teresa calls Xander and tells him that she is okay. Despite this, the boy promises to find a way and get to her through the dangerous fence. Jenna is joined by her colleagues who did not manage to leave the city. Meanwhile, the girl's fiancé receives a warning that he should not break the rules due to personal attachments. Jake is asked to help the doctors sort through the belongings of the sick to find their relatives. Examining the Zero patient's mobile phone, the guy notices a frightening detail. A day before his death, the young man communicated with a blonde woman who had not been known about before. Jake immediately reports his findings to his colleagues, and the department decides to send a squad to search for the stranger. The police find the blonde's address, but her parents say she has not been seen since yesterday. Another emergency meeting is called, and everyone is ordered to find the girl within hours. While waiting for the doctor, Caddy listens to a news broadcast talking about the Zero patient and the doctors who contracted the virus from him. For the first time, the woman notices discrepancies, but her thoughts are interrupted by Dr. Connor, who assures the teacher that everything will end soon and she and the children will be able to go home. Leaving, Caddy still decides to ask about her suspicions. She was surprised that Dr. Sanders died before the Syrian who supposedly infected her. But Connor avoids answering, muttering something about differences in immunity. Jake is sent to find the girl, and the authorities hope to hide the fact that the infected person is behind the fence. But it is no longer possible to help the blonde. The cops find her in serious condition in the apartment of old friends. The blonde and her friends are taken to the quarantine zone. But Lorms admits to Alex that the situation is too serious. The virus spreads faster than they could have anticipated. Alex calls his fiancée to reassure her, but he does not dare to tell her what the city is facing. The police have been ordered to strengthen the cordon and use weapons in case of violations. More people with symptoms of infection continue to arrive at the hospital. Among them, Jake sees many children, but the doctor says that this is not the worst. The hospital is running out of free beds, and soon there will be nowhere to isolate the sick. In addition to the bad news, the officer has an unpleasant task. Connor asks him to cremate the bodies to prevent outbreaks of other diseases. Another problem for the authorities is Leo Green, a local journalist. He continues to publish panic-inducing videos, and Lorms instructs Alex to stop the provocateur. The cop tries to negotiate with Leo, but the journalist is sure that the authorities are hiding something, and he must get to the truth. A few minutes later, a new video from Green appears online, this time attracting the president's attention. Jenna's colleagues realize that they will not have enough food until the end of the quarantine, and the men decide to go to the store. The girl does not like this idea, but the majority votes to take the risk. Teresa's mother also takes the situation lightly. The girl sees her mother raising prices on essential goods to make a profit. To entertain the children, Caddy takes them to the roof. This gives everyone a chance to breathe fresh air, but the girl does not have time to relax. Thomas runs away, ignoring the teacher's cries. The girl finds the student on the stairs, next to a sick man. Drops fall on the boy, and it becomes clear that he is now infected. Thomas is sent to isolation, and the teacher blames herself. She tells the doctor that she promised the boy's father to take care of Thomas, but let him down. The men return with full bags of groceries, but Jenna does not let them into the office. She notices that her friend took off his gloves, meaning he could have brought the virus on his hands. A customer who was charged too much brings her friends. They raid the store, but Teresa's mother is saved by Jake's appearance, who received orders to patrol the city. Caddy finds Thomas's ward empty. She catches up with the boy at the hospital exit, and his father refuses to leave his son in the quarantine zone. The doctors have no choice but to let the patient go. Alex's pleas have no effect on Leo, and in pursuit of a hot story, he allows his colleagues to leave the closed area. He is not even frightened by the fact that one of the girls has symptoms of the disease. Alex and Jake manage to meet secretly on neutral territory. Both guys are nervous, but they have to work together. Leo Green tells the whole world how to leave the closed area. The police have to hold back the crowd while workers cut the ladder. This leads to serious riots and the cops have to open fire to kill. To prevent such incidents, the government shuts down the internet and phone communication, depriving everyone of the only joy, talking to each other. Caddy accidentally enters a closed room and learns the truth about the number of victims, among them or her students. At the same time, Jenna also tries to get to the truth, and she assembles a radio phone to call Alex. The girl has to climb to the roof to get the antenna, where she meets Sam, a technician who hid on the roof to avoid infection. Alex changes partners and goes on night duty. In the middle of the night, he notices an intruder and asks him to stop. The criminal turns out to be Xander, who is trying to enter the danger zone to his fiancée, but the cop does not let him do it and pulls the trigger. The bullet turns out to be rubber, and Xander is simply taken to the hospital. The officer visits him and apologizes, but warns that he will do the same thing next time. Leo decides to take advantage of this. He is preparing a scandalous report about the abuse of power. The store is visited by robbers again, but this time Teresa is also in danger. However, unexpectedly, the women are saved by another gang planning to profit from the quarantine. By the end of the day, Xander's ward is empty. The nurse says he left with Leo Green, but Alex does not have time to stop them. The duty officer reports that the guy has entered the infection zone. Dr. Connor shows Jake the rats that were injected with the medicine. Unfortunately, right before the cop's eyes, the animal passes out, and the hope for a quick rescue disappears. Jenna manages to call Alex, but the call lasts only a few seconds. The girl does not have time to learn anything. Leo accidentally learns about the call. He again hints to the officer that he has taken the wrong side and should think about what is happening. In gratitude for his help, Leo asks Xander to visit his friends and record a video message with them. The guy completes the task and throws the flash drive over the wall, but on it, the journalist finds evidence that his friends are no longer alive. After this, Xander finally finds his fiancée, but raiders block his way. The general panic is compounded by a new problem: hunger. People's food supplies begin to run out, and the government is forced to find a solution. Walking down the corridor with her son, Caddy meets an old man who supplies the hospital with lab rats. The woman notices another inconsistency. She saw Bert with the rodents before the quarantine, but he assures her that this is not the case. Lammers asks Alex to organize food delivery to the danger zone. The policeman asks for time to prepare, but is refused. He must do it by tomorrow without explanation. Alex has to ask Jake for help. The guy is also not thrilled with the idea, but they have no other choice. Early in the morning, the loading begins, and hundreds of people come to get their rations. The gang from the store also gathers for the distribution, and the leader orders Xander to go with them to stay clean. Jenna goes outside for the first time in many days to get some food. She approaches the distribution center, but a gangster car passes by, making her uneasy. Jake recognizes his friend and gives her a ration without a cue. He also hands her Alex's keys and asks her to hold on, as everything should end soon. Constantly thinking about the epidemic and inconsistencies, Caddy again turns to the doctor with questions, but he is clearly not willing to talk about it. The doctor assures the teacher that he knows no more about the virus than she does. The humanitarian point is surrounded by the store gang. There are many more bandits, and they take the food boxes to sell them to hungry people later. Alex is furious that the leadership did not listen to him, and the products fell into the hands of bandits. But Lammers does not see this as a problem. She believes that residents still have a chance to buy food and satisfy their hunger. Jake's partner turns out to be infected, and the officer offers him help, but the officer refuses to go to the hospital. He knows that no one can help him, and decides to solve the problem on his own. Returning to the shelter, Jenna falls into the hands of other bandits who also try to take the box. The woman is saved by Sam, whom she recently refused to let into the office, but the friends remember Jenna's recent act and, despite everything, do not let her or Sam into the clean zone. Alex and Jake meet again, and the senior partner admits that he no longer trusts the leadership. He tells his friend that, due to the robbery, he had to leave his subordinate in the danger zone. At this moment, this very subordinate calls Chief Besser and reports that their plan worked. Jake tells Caddy that she was right. Something is being hidden from them. Dr. Sanders and her boyfriend had no personal belongings, but the conversation has to be postponed. Thomas's sister is admitted to the hospital, asking the teacher to find the boy. Their father died, and Thomas is left alone. Alex also begins to doubt the leadership's honesty, and he goes to Leo's house to hear his version. He finds the journalist drunk, but the guy comes to his senses and promises to help in the search for answers. Despite Jacob's persuasion, Caddy goes in search of Thomas. The gang is joined by the very cops sent by the police chief. He promises the bandits a radio phone in exchange for being accepted into the group. Thomas is not at home, but Caddy discovers her son, who secretly followed her. Quentin tells his mother that he knows where to look for his friend, and the company heads to the baseball field. The search for the truth has to be postponed. Alex is tasked with removing a man from an empty house who is preventing it from being demolished. The cop has to spend a lot of time talking about the happy past the city has lost. Teresa's mother helps the lovers escape. She gives the couple a bag of baby things and tells them to wait for her in a safe place. The company finds Thomas's things, but they are surrounded by a crowd of crazy racers. Jake has to open fire, and only then do the young people continue to search for the boy. Caddy finds her son and his friend, but they are near an infected man. The teacher is frightened, but Thomas assures her that he cannot get infected. Xander and Teresa come to Jenna's office and ask for shelter. One of the girl's friends is against the couple entering, but Jenna lets the guests in without his approval. Thomas is placed in isolation, but Caddy has hope that the boy indeed has immunity and can save everyone. During the meeting, Alex hands Jake a flash drive with a damaged file. If it can be restored, they will learn the truth, but only Jenna can do it. In return, the officer also receives a memory card with a message for the old man from the empty house. When he delivers the message, the stubborn man cannot hold back his tears. Teresa sorts through the baby things and finds the radio phone her mother stole. At that moment, the phone's owners appear at the door, holding a gun to the girl's mother's head. The company has to open the door, but the bandit refuses to take the phone and leave. He demands that Teresa and her boyfriend go with him. Unexpectedly, Jake comes to the rescue. He convinces the gangster to leave and leave the office alone. Alex sees hundreds of people moving in an unknown direction, but no one can say where they will be placed. Jenna tries to open the file, but it is severely damaged. The girl does not have time to do anything with it. New guests appear in the office, a gang wanting access to prohibited drugs. The company begins to strengthen their shelter, but the intruders find weak spots through which they manage to penetrate inside. Tony decides to take a risk. He goes down to negotiate with the criminals, but the negotiations fail. The elevator returns Tony with an axe in his back. In addition to the deceased guy, one of the attackers enters the office, but he does not have time to harm anyone. The guy is infected and collapses at the entrance to the room. Jenna finally manages to restore the file, but the girl does not have time to watch it. The power goes out in the office, and all the doors are locked. To restore power, Jenna has to leave the shelter and go downstairs. Meanwhile, the bandits almost manage to open the elevator doors, but the girl raises the switch in time. On the way back, Jenna takes the radio phone and calls Alex. Talking to his fiancée, the officer hears her being attacked. The girl manages to break free and return to the office, but the intruders do not retreat and try to cut through the door. The company has no choice but to come up with the craziest plan. Alex tries to penetrate the closed zone to help his fiancée, but he is caught by the National Guard soldiers. Jenna orders everyone to take cover, and when the psychos burst into the office, Jake activates an explosive device. A fire starts, but all the attackers are unconscious. Unexpectedly, one of them jumps up and attacks Teresa's mother. The men manage to neutralize him, but the woman is infected. Alex is arrested, but unaware of this, Jenna asks Jake to call her fiancé and calm him down. She also mentions that the phone the bandits had has a government military number and they need to figure out how it ended up in the infection zone. Teresa's mother leaves. As a farewell, she asks her daughter for forgiveness for not wanting to accept her child. More than 48 hours have passed since Thomas's contact with the infected, and the boy continues to look healthy. His DNA is implanted in rats to try to create a vaccine. Connor reports his observations to the leadership, but the boss tells the guy that they don't have time for experiments. Caddy and Jake review footage from surveillance cameras and find out that the zero patient was not the immigrant boy, but a certain Henry Burns. He came every morning to secretly meet with Dr. Sanders, and judging by the man's behavior, he knew about his illness. Dr. Connor allows Thomas to leave and informs everyone that the boy does not just have immunity, his body defeated the virus. This means that based on his DNA, they will be able to make a cure for the unknown virus. Jenna leads her friends to a church under which there are ancient tunnels. The girl plans to lead the group out of the cordon through them to safety. Alex tells Leo everything he learned from Jake, but the journalist cannot find any trace of Henry Burns. The men get the impression that the zero patient was deliberately sent to the hospital. Lammers returns Alex's badge and authority, but in return she demands that the cop take Thomas out of the infected zone and hand him over for experiments in her unit. Dr. Connor disagrees with Lammers' decision, but she rejects all objections and insists that only her laboratory can find the cure. Everyone has hope for a quick return to peace and normal life. It seems not everyone will live to see this happy moment, but some decide not to waste time and enjoy the moment, using all possible safety measures. Leo finds out that 2 days before the epidemic started, Burns received a package with the virus. Now he wants to know who the sender was, but Alex asks him to postpone the investigation so he can carry out the order. All night the company breaks through the exit to the tunnel, and in the morning they finally go underground. At the same time, Caddy and Jake go to the meeting place to hand Thomas over to Alex. Dr. Connor realizes he was wrong. The patient bitten by a rat injected with Thomas's DNA is infected. During the seizure, he infects several more people, and the doctor understands that the boy is an asymptomatic carrier. If he leaves the cordon, the virus will take over the entire city. The company has to return due to gas that has accumulated underground. They remain in the infection zone. Meanwhile, Thomas ends up in the hold the zone between districts. He is met by Alex and Dr. Lammers, but at the last moment, the transfer is cancelled and the boy is sent back. While Alex tries to figure out what to do next, he receives a voice message from Leo. The journalist claims that the virus was created by Connor. Alex and Lammers remain in quarantine in the container between the zones. Thomas is returned to the clinic and quarantined to figure out what to do next. Jenna's company returns. The group could not go underground due to accumulated gas, but the office is empty. Teresa and Xander left to find a cleaner place. On the main street, the guy begins to suspect he was wrong. Hundreds of protesters are holding a rally demanding to be released from the infected zone. Xander tries to protect the girl from the crowd, but Teresa sees her mother in the crowd and tries to break through to her. Not wanting to risk his pregnant girlfriend, the guy decides to check who she saw in the crowd. Jake arranges a date for Caddy, and the couple has a great time until a frightened Quentin runs into the room. The boy says that old man Ray took the other children and led them out of the hospital to break through with the others. Leo meets with an ex-girlfriend and asks her to get Connor's call details. He has no doubt that the doctor's to blame, but to prove it, he needs facts. Xander realizes that Teresa was mistaken, but as a result, he encounters an infected person. The boy manages to escape. Unlike Bert, the old man has his box of medicine taken from him and falls to the ground. The street riots intensify, and a squad is sent to the danger zone. Lammers tries to stop the captain, but he does not listen to the doctor's orders, and several vehicles head through the cordon. Jake finds Ray, but the girl he took with him is not there. The old man abandoned her because of virus symptoms. Caddy spots Mary before Jake can tell her about the infection, and the woman takes the child into her arms despite the blood. The crazed crowd pushes Teresa to the ground. Xander runs to her but is afraid to touch his girlfriend for fear of infecting her. When Jake finds his friend, it becomes clear that she is now also sick. Caddy realizes this from her boyfriend's look, and upon returning to the hospital, tries to wash off all traces of the infection. Leo gets the information he needs, but it does not match his assumptions. Moreover, his friend tells the journalist that Burns called someone on an encrypted phone that only high-ranking officials can have that day. Susie, Jenna's friend, confesses that she is expecting a baby. Going for a test to check this, Jenna meets Xander and Teresa, who stayed on the street after the riot. Caddy ends up in isolation, and Jake tries to support her, but the girl's nerves can no longer withstand it. After 48 hours, Dr. Lammers and Alex are released from the container. There are only 8 hours left until the end of Caddy's quarantine. At the same time, Teresa's baby is about to be born. Alex visits Leo and finds out that on the day of the infection, Burns did not call Connor, but Lammers. There is no doubt that she started the epidemic for some personal purpose. Dr. Connor conducts his first round after leaving isolation. When he reaches Caddy, he admits that he cannot release her. The onset of symptoms has increased, and 48 hours is no longer a guarantee of health. The soldiers who participated in stopping the riot were infected. Lammers reports this to the journalists, but she promises to find a cure and save the country. At Alex's request, Jake inspects the apartment of Leo's friends, who were also investigating. There he finds ashes, all that remains of the documents and evidence. When friends meet to discuss this, Alex realizes that Lammers and the police chief are involved. Dennis, the father of Susan's child, returns to the office, but the man shows signs of infection on his face, and the company refuses to let him in. To make it easier for the man, Susan tells him that there was a mistake. She is not pregnant, and he has nothing to blame himself for. Alex meets with the chief and says he knows the truth, but it turns out that Besser did not know that Lammers released the virus into the masses. Jenna and Susan fail to ease Teresa's pain, but as usual, Jake appears at the right time. The guy calms the young mother and helps her daughter be born. Alex asks Leo not to publish material against Lammers until they have substantial evidence. An argument begins between the men, and the journalist agrees to wait no more than 2 hours. Not wanting to waste time, Alex goes directly to the doctor and asks her to resign. Lammers tries to intimidate the officer, but when she realizes he is not joking, the woman promises to hold a conference and leave her post. Teresa shows Xander their daughter, and the baby is placed in a crib made of boxes. Jake tells Caddy about this joyful event, but the girl's delight is overshadowed by a cough with traces of blood. Lammers gives a press conference, but does not admit her guilt. She claims that Dr. Connor accidentally released the virus. Still unaware of this, Connor conducts experiments and tries to find a cure. Jake asks him to try to save Caddy, and the doctor agrees to give her a trial dose of serum from Thomas's blood. Old man Bert regains consciousness and discovers that his leg is broken. Despite this, he finds the box of medicine and tries to get home, where his wife has been waiting for him all this time. Connor learns what Lammers did. He does not understand why his colleague did this to him, but despite this, the doctor does not give up trying to save Caddy. Giving her the injection, Connor tells the girl how the virus penetrated their clinic. Jenna meets Bert and gives him her water. She also gives the old man a cart so he can finally reach his wife. After the injection, Caddy gets worse. She is tormented by nightmares and barely waits until morning. To support his friend, Jake brings a TV and invites her to the movies. The couple spends the whole day together, but Caddy gets worse again, and she decides to confess her love to her boyfriend, fearing that there may not be another chance. Jenna tells her friend about her conversation with the gangsters. Trader Miz offered her a route to the healthy zone, but it is very expensive. Sam agrees to contribute his share, but only if Jenna agrees to leave the others and go with him. Alex goes to Leo's apartment, which turns out to be empty. After losing, the journalist refused to fight Lammers, but later the cop receives a pizza from a friend in which Leo left him a note with an address and a key. Caddy gets worse by the minute, and Jake prepares to say goodbye to his friend. He asks the doctor to help him put on a protective suit, and when the girl falls to the floor, the boyfriend takes her hand to ease her suffering. The doctor tells Jake that he can say goodbye to Caddy's body, which is waiting for cremation. For the first time since their acquaintance, the guy manages to touch his friend's face without gloves. Jenna tells her friends about the opportunity to leave and suggests finding the money. But Teresa refuses to go. She wants her daughter to grow up a little. Arriving at the address Leo sent him, Alex finds evidence that will help him punish Lammers. Teresa, Xander, and their newborn daughter reach Bert's house, Teresa's grandfather. The young mother plans to stay at her relative's house until the end of quarantine, but seeing the empty shelves, Xander insists that they must run. Alex learns about a certain Catherine Hops, whose son was connected with Lammers. From her, the man learns the address of the laboratory and heads there. While Dr. Connor tries to create a cure, news about him spreads throughout the zone. A gang breaks into the clinic wanting to punish the doctor, but Jake convinces them that he needs to be protected to be the first to get the vaccine. This is the last thing Jake can do before leaving. He decides to run through the cordon to save Quentin. Alex inspects the abandoned lab and finds solid evidence of Lammers' guilt. He accuses her and names a true zero patient who fell ill several years ago. This time, Lammers does not argue. She admits she created the virus and believes it is needed for the country's safety. But now she asks Alex to postpone the battle and focus on fighting the virus, which has now crossed the cordon. An attack occurs in the hospital, and one of the gangsters becomes infected. Dr. Connor has to give him the test drug. It is his only chance not to become a victim of the bandits. Jake prepares Quentin to cross into the healthy zone and promises to find him as soon as it is all over. Jenna's company also prepares to go underground to cross the cordon. At the same time, the body of the boy who tried to take the risk is examined, and an army is assembled so that no one else can cross the border. To prevent illegal crossings, the tunnels are mined and blown up. Alex tries to stop it, understanding that there may be people there, but the captain refuses to make concessions. Unaware of the government's plans, Miz orders the fugitives to prepare to descend into the tunnel. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Dr. Connor transfuses Thomas's blood to the infected gangster, hoping this will cure him. Despite all attempts, the gangster cannot be saved. Because of this, Jake has to save the doctor. The gang leader cannot forgive him for the loss of his brother. The explosions catch the group deep in the tunnel. The ceiling begins to collapse, and the company is divided. Teresa, Xander, and their baby are left alone. Connor finds a way to make the medicine, but for this he needs people with the same blood as Thomas. Jake tries to find volunteers, but no one wants to participate in the dangerous experiment. Then the guy prepares a speech in which he names all the dead. For their sake, Jake asks people to get tested and, in case of a match, become donors. Miz leads the group to a dead end, but the guide does not give up and looks for new exits. Alex learns about this and asks Lammers to stop the explosions and bring people to the surface. As an exception, Lammers promises the officer 1 hour. After that, all tunnels will be destroyed. Jake's words convince people and they gather to get tested. Xander takes his family to Teresa's mother's store and the girl decides to stay there until the end. The doctor finds blood with antibodies. A local priest can be a donor for the medicine. Old man Bert spills the last bottle of wine and adds a secret ingredient to it. He and his wife raise their glasses to toast that their suffering ends. Hugging on the couch, the couple prepares to go to a better world. Alex finds the fugitives, among whom he sees Jenna. The girl assures her fiancé will let them into the clean zone, but Alex does not know what to do. His time is running out. Dr. Lammers orders the tunnels destroyed, but at this moment, Leo's report about everything the blonde did appears on the screens. Alex does not let the fugitives go, but returns to the quarantine zone with them. And Jake, scattering Caddy's ashes over the city, prepares for a new battle with the virus that changed the world. Physics professor Jason Desson's morning begins as usual. An alarm clock rings, he checks his high school son Charlie's homework and makes coffee for his beloved wife Daniela. The woman is in a hurry and grateful for the attention, however she is adamantly against letting Charlie drive. Despite this, Jason trusts the boy with the car and they nearly have an accident. The father calms his son and suggests he confess his feelings to a girl he likes. Meanwhile, Jason receives a call from his friend, Ryan, who is eager to share some good news. He has received a very prestigious scientific award and invites Jason to celebrate that evening. Later, Jason heads to the university, where he tries to explain the essence of Schrödinger's thought experiment to his students. He draws a cat locked in a box on the board. Inside the box, there's also a vial of poison, a radioactive atom, and a Geiger counter. If the atom does not decay, the cat survives. But if it does, the Geiger counter will detect radiation, the vial will break, and the cat will die. All this illustrates the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, which posits that until the box is opened, the atom is in a state of superposition, undetermined. The lecture is interrupted by a phone call, and Jason watches as the students hurriedly leave without hearing that the cat is simultaneously alive and dead. Later, Jason enters a dark room, records the day's events in his notebook, and injects himself with dark matter. The scene shifts to the family kitchen, where Jason and Daniela are preparing dinner. Charlie teases his parents for kissing too often. Then messages from Ryan, who has been waiting at the bar for a while, arrive. Daniela insists that her husband should go meet his best friend. Jason relents and heads to the bar. Ryan is delighted by his arrival and orders Daniela's favorite drink, which the bartender notes is the last bottle. Ryan introduces his colleagues to Jason and unexpectedly offers him a position in his new consciousness research lab. There's one catch: the Center for Neuropsychology will be in San Francisco, and Jason is unsure if his family will want to move from Chicago. He promises to think about it and heads home, but on a dark street he is suddenly stopped by an armed man in a mask. Jason is ready to hand over everything valuable he has, but the robber seems interested in something else. He puts Jason in the car, calling him by name, and orders him to comply. Along the way, the robber unlocks his phone, knowing the password, and asks questions about Ryan. Soon they arrive at a deserted building where the robber orders Jason to undress. He complies, but still decides to attack the assailant. However, he receives a heavy blow to the head and immediately feels an injection in his neck. The robber tells him to put on different clothes and warns that Jason is being given a new opportunity. He should remember this thought because now he will have everything he ever dreamed of, and he's doing this for both of them. When Jason asks who the robber is, he's told it's better not to know. Jason's consciousness fades. He regains consciousness in a hospital ward. He is examined and sent to a shower stall. Eventually, Jason comes to his senses in an unfamiliar bedroom. He tries to leave, but the doors are locked. Suddenly, a woman he doesn't recognize enters, behaves as if she knows him well, and introduces herself as Amanda. She informs him that his body is clean and he is no longer in quarantine. Jason doesn't understand what is happening, but no one answers his questions. The second person Jason sees is Layton, with whom he once worked a long time ago. Layton congratulates him on his triumph and calls him the chief scientific officer. Then, the blinds open and numerous colleagues applaud Jason, welcoming back the only one who returned. He has been absent for 14 months and 10 days, and they all want to hear about his journey. Confused, Jason begins to talk about the meeting at the bar and the strange robber, but his patience runs out because he doesn't know the people around him and doesn't understand what's happening here. Layton announces that he must stay here overnight. However, Jason pushes him away and starts to run. He manages to reach the exit where a security guard calls him by name and helps open the door. Jason flees the premises despite being pursued. He manages to catch a taxi, gives his address, and heads home. But upon entering, he finds his home changed beyond recognition. At the same time, in another reality, the new Jason returns from the bar and sees his upset wife Daniela. He embraces her, tells her about Ryan's offer, and reminds her of his long-ago choice, to marry her, not a cold sterile laboratory. The wife thaws and kisses her husband, unaware that this man is actually not her Jason. In another world, the first Jason meets Amanda in his home instead of his wife and son, who says they live there together. Jason does not believe this and begins to look for traces of his son, but Charlie's room looks completely different. Now it is Jason's own office, filled with awards for outstanding achievements and discoveries he has received over the years. He tries to call his wife Daniela, but the number is unavailable. Jason roams around the house trying to understand what is really happening. Meanwhile, Amanda makes a phone call, asking to handle the matter herself, but Jason sees a car with security arriving at the house and flees. In another reality, Daniela leads her husband into the bedroom and notices a wound on his arm. However, he assures her that she would not believe the truth and kisses her. Meanwhile, Jason 1 rushes to the bar he was at the night before, but the bartender refuses to recognize him, although the man calls him by name and reminds him of his favorite drink. Jason insists, but the bartender kicks him out, advising him to check his head. Then Jason goes to the hospital, where he undergoes a brain tomogram and is given sedatives. He constantly remembers Daniela and tries to find his wedding ring. At the same time, Jason 2 wakes up next to Daniela, kisses his wife, and surveys the kitchen, trying to find coffee. Simultaneously, the first Jason comes to and sees a doctor in front of him who tells him about the results of his tests. The fact is that an unknown psychoactive substance has been found in his blood, but according to all other indicators, he is completely healthy. At his request, they tried to find his family, but there is no one in Chicago with such names. The doctors also checked his file. The woman lists his achievements in science, which Jason himself does not remember, and she informs him that he had been missing for more than a year, and they would like to know where he was. Jason 1 himself checks his information and still finds Daniela, but under her maiden name. In this world, she continues to pursue painting, and her exhibition is supposed to open just today. At this time, Amanda, Layton, and a security officer discuss the situation. The woman suggests calling the police. However, Layton opposes the idea and the security officer suggests checking the hospital. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Jason steals a white coat and walks out into the hall where he sees the familiar security officer. He manages to avoid the encounter and leave the hospital. Jason 2 arrives at the university and, apologizing for his tardiness, continues the lecture. Jason 1 arrives at the exhibition hall. Hearing his name, the man is freely admitted inside, where he examines a modern installation. Later, he sees his own portrait among the displayed paintings and finds Daniela. He embraces her and tries to ask about Charlie, but the woman doesn't know who that is. Moreover, she is constantly being congratulated, and she introduces Jason as the inspiration for her success. Ryan arrives, very surprised by Jason's appearance, as there had been many varied rumors about his disappearance. The man is upset with Jason because he did a lot for him and Velocity. Hearing the company's name, from which he recently escaped, Jason begins to ask questions, but then Daniela starts a speech, which includes questions about unfulfilled dreams. Everyone was asking what he could have been and advises remembering the other doors he could have entered. At the same time, in another world, Jason 2 listens to Daniela's stories about her work plans and gives advice to his son, which surprises his wife. Simultaneously, Jason 1, Ryan, and Daniela from the New World discuss plans. Jason suddenly proposes a hypothesis about a scientist, married to the woman of his dreams, who once went to a bar where he met an old friend who had received a prestigious award. But on the way back, he was attacked, and when he woke up, everything around him had changed. A brain check revealed no abnormalities, only an unknown substance was found in his body. For a practical joke, it was too elaborate, and he had not gone mad. Jason asked to explain how he inspired Daniela's creativity, and she reminds him that once he came to her and said that theoretically people exist in millions of parallel realities, and his decision to part with her was his biggest mistake in this world. Then he talked about some secret project and warned that they would not see each other again. Then Jason starts to describe their life together with their son, causing Ryan's anger and Daniela's tears. He describes his friend's achievements in his own world, but he leaves. At the same time, Jason 2 mixes up toothbrushes, causing his wife's confusion. And Jason 1 receives permission to spend the night in Daniela's guest room, and looking around he finds an elastic band, which he wraps around his ring finger, mimicking a wedding ring. Meanwhile, Jason 2 perplexes his wife with unusual tenderness and examines the photographs on the walls of the house, after which he calls Ryan and declines his offer to work in San Francisco. At this time, Jason 1 calls Amanda and tells her that he is going to the psychiatric hospital. The woman heads there, but it turns out to be a ruse that Jason used to lure her out of the house, and now he and Daniela are inspecting his home together. The man points to a photo, but in his world they are depicted as a family in it. He talks about a son who is as talented as his mother, and Daniela admits that after he left her, she got rid of the child. Jason doesn't believe this, as everything was different, but Daniela insists that in her world, that's exactly what happened. People cannot understand why their memories differ so much, but the woman starts to believe his stories. Later, he finds records of his double from this world and realizes that he made a great discovery in quantum physics. Jason 2 created a more voluminous version of the container where a person was put into superposition and gained the ability to move between multiple realities. It turns out that his double, Jason 2, moved to his world and sent Jason 1 to his dimension, to this world. So Jason is one person, living in reality until the question of marrying Daniela came up. When the first Jason chose his family, the second left Daniela. Their universes split, and the second Jason gave himself to science and invented the container. They switched worlds, but why? Later, Daniela admits that she is glad he appeared, and he explains the rubber band on his hand as a desire to preserve the marriage and return to his wife. He talks about their life there, in another reality, and admits that they were happy. Daniela kisses him, but at that moment, someone knocks at the door. They go to open it, and a security officer from the company Velocity, from which Jason had escaped, bursts into the house. He asks not to use weapons, but the woman shoots Daniela, and the last thing Jason sees is her blood-covered face. This is the first 2 episodes of a new series from Apple TV titled Dark Matter. At night, Leighton informs Amanda about what happened, and she rushes to the center where Jason has been taken. Leighton, in the meantime, apologizes to the tied-up Jason. He couldn't imagine his friend was so unstable and cannot release him yet. Jason, shocked by Daniela's murder, does not want to talk about his supposed genius invention. Jason 2 invites Daniela 1 to a cafe. She is surprised by her husband's behavior, but likes this new Jason. Moreover, they have a dinner planned for close friends the next day, something their family hasn't done in a long time. In a parallel reality, a detective visits Leighton, surprised by yet another disappearance of an employee from their lab. Before this, Blair and a couple of junior employees also vanished. Leighton pretends to know nothing. The detective goes to Amanda. Later, Amanda expresses her displeasure. She is very upset with Don's behavior, while the boss reminds her of the millions spent. If everything comes out, the project will be shut down. They don't understand what happened to Jason, who decides to play along with the colleagues and asks for help in remembering everything. Leighton takes him to a hangar where a huge metal box stands. Jason recalls trying to create a small Schrodinger's box once, but Leighton convinces him that he managed to make a huge box that can easily fit several people. Only Jason knows how it works. The man steps inside, but there are no panels or screens. Recording devices don't work either. Jason is told about the missing people and then shown footage of him emerging from the box. Jason 2 takes Charlie to a store, buys him an expensive skateboard, surprising his son with generosity, and then questions him about the family friends coming to dinner tomorrow. In a parallel reality, Amanda tells Jason 1 that she works as a psychiatrist in the lab, and they have been living together for over a year. Before he disappeared, he met with his ex-girlfriend and then just vanished. Jason suddenly suggests he might not be who she thinks he is. Amanda leaves completely puzzled. Meanwhile, in the parallel reality, Jason 2 welcomes the guests. He keeps conversations going, displaying knowledge of everyone's lives gleaned from social networks, and talks with his son. Jason 1 tries to answer Leighton's questions, who begins to suspect him of being an imposter. The man is beaten, forced to reveal the whereabouts of their Jason, but he knows nothing and cannot explain how the container works. Leighton asks him to strain his memory, as there might be a way to reach a world where cancer is cured. However, all is in vain. Daniela thanks her husband for the wonderful evening. She hasn't seen him like this in a long time, and he seems completely changed. At the same time in the parallel world, Ryan is thrown into Jason's room, horrified to learn of Daniela's death, as he was the one who told Leighton that Jason went to her. Ryan had created a drug for Jason that changes the chemical composition of the brain's cortex, temporarily putting some parts to sleep. Jason admits he is not the Jason Ryan knew in this world. The drug creates a special effect that, combined with the container, allows for traveling between worlds. Leighton's men take Ryan away. Meanwhile, in the parallel world, Jason too tells his wife he nearly died under the wheels, prompting him to reassess his life and express his gratitude for her presence. In the neighboring world, Amanda enters Jason's room, ordering him to follow her as she intends to get him out of there. They walk through the corridors but encounter a guard who raises the alarm. Jason and Amanda run to the container. They are chased, but Jason closes the iron door, cutting off Don's fingers. Amanda injects both herself and Jason with the drug that aids in transferring. Jason too, in the meantime, reviews family archives and finds a birth certificate of another son, Max. In an alternate world, Jason 1 and Amanda find themselves in a dark corridor with many doors. Leighton, angered by their disappearance, enters the container himself. Jason and Amanda proceed through the corridor, but all doors look the same. The man suggests the doors lead to other worlds. They step out into one and find themselves on the street of a dead city. There is ash and smoke everywhere. They look around and notice a house in front of them starting to crumble. They rush back to the container, barely making it. Coughing, Amanda shows a case with the remaining doses of the drug, 48 in total. According to the coordinates, the container stands in the same place as in her world, meaning only the external world changes. They inject themselves again and head to the next reality. Leighton also enters the corridor, searching for the pair, but without success so far. Jason too attends a lecture in place of his double, but realizing the students are uninterested, he leaves the auditorium, announcing his resignation. Jason 1 and Amanda step into another world and find themselves in a forest. They continue and enter a reality without an atmosphere after a nuclear explosion. The woman's nerves give way, but Jason explains it's a multiverse where everything that could happen did happen. They will soon need food and water, so they must find a habitable world. He opens another door, and the pair end up in the Velocity facility, witnessing Leighton and Don killing their doubles. Jason manages to push Amanda into the container and close the doors. Later, they open the next doors but find dead worlds everywhere. Exhausted, Amanda rushes through the first door she sees, with Jason hurrying after her. They find themselves in the midst of a snowstorm. The woman loses consciousness from the cold. Jason searches for a bunker but sees a house nearby. He breaks a window, carries Amanda inside, wraps her in a blanket, and lights a fire in the fireplace. Meanwhile, Jason too visits Leighton in his world. Here too, he is rich but spends his time idly. Jason offers him to become his investor in a very unusual venture. In the snowy world, Jason 1 steps outside and sees a completely frozen city. Jason 2 takes Leighton 2 to a bunker and offers him the substance. Jason 1 returns to the house, finds a family photograph of the owners, and remembers his own family. His wife pulls out a photo of their second son, who is no longer there. Amanda, warming up, learns that the container is buried in snow and finding it is impossible. She recalls being stuck in a snowstorm. Jason suddenly realizes this might have triggered their arrival in the frozen world. Perhaps they can choose where to move. Jason too shows Leighton to the container and promises to show him the path not taken. Instantly, the corridor with doors appears before them. Amanda and Jason, armed with probes, begin searching for the container in the snowdrifts. Suddenly, Amanda realizes that the compass always points in the same direction, indicating the container's approximate location. They head that way and soon find the box. In the neighboring universe, Daniela and Charlie walk to the memorial tree. Simultaneously, Jason starts telling Amanda about his second son. Daniela recounts the same story to Charlie. Once, Jason and Daniela were thrilled to learn they were expecting twins, but Max had a weak heart and died. They planted a tree, mixing their son's ashes with the soil. Every birthday, they sit under it and remember the boy. Leighton, too, meanwhile, is delighted by what he sees. Jason tells him about his life in the world where Leighton was his research partner. The tycoon agrees to fund his work. Jason 1 narrates his abduction to Amanda. He doesn't understand why his double went to such lengths. After questioning him about his life, Amanda suggests that the double simply wanted to fix Jason 1's life, making him happy while also taking what he himself lacked, a family. Daniela and Charlie discuss their father's strange behavior, but then Jason too arrives, congratulates his son on his birthday, and gives him car keys. To his stunned wife, he confesses he quit his job but assures her not to worry about money as he has returned to science and already found a sponsor. She can pursue her passion for painting. Jason, Juan, and Amanda experiment in front of the next door. Jason tries to set a mood, outlining the conditions for the next world. Everything should be peaceful and beautiful, but opening the door, the pair end up in water. The city is flooded. With great difficulty, they close the container door. Amanda asks him to analyze his feelings, and Jason thinks he understands the mistake, but the woman is convinced that lying won't work here. Later they rest, reminiscing about their loved ones. Amanda admits she loves special candies, but they don't exist in Jason's world. The woman reveals that the first to test the container was Engineer Blair, followed by 2 volunteers. Soon the drug's effect wears off. Amanda opens the door and the pair find themselves in the Velocity basement. Initially, they want to escape, but hunger takes over. They look around, but the cafeteria is closed and the elevator doesn't work. Amanda recalls a protocol designed for such a situation. They find a bedroom with someone lying under a blanket, but it's a shriveled body. It becomes clear that something terrible happened in this world. As they prepare to return to the container, a person with a gun stops them, but upon closer inspection, Amanda recognizes Blair. After joyful embraces, Jason tells Blair everything that happened. In his world, he knows her as his wife's friend, but there, she works as a lawyer. Blair leads them to a habitable area and offers them food. She arrived here 3 months ago when nothing worked. She managed to start the generators and access the system, discovering that Earth was overrun by creatures that devoured all living things. She went outside for food and saw the dead world. Blair also has drug vials but is not yet ready to leave. Jason too and Layton continue to explore the bunker. They compare their worlds, finding similarities and differences. Jason too explains that money varies between worlds and carrying it is dangerous. One must be careful and honest. Blair reminds Amanda that Jason belongs to another world, so she must decide where she wants to be without considering him. Blair refuses to join them, not ready to re-enter the container. Layton, having visited the first world, is thrilled. Jason is ready to let him go, believing he has prepared him. Blair gives the pair her diary, describing the world she saw. Unfortunately, she has few vials left. Jason and Amanda leave. In the corridor, Amanda suddenly cries. Jason too ruined lives, knowing how to use the container. Jason 1 consoles her. Emboldened, Layton promises Jason 2 $1 million for the next doses of the drug. Jason 1 decides to write in Blair's diary what he wants to see behind the next door. He thinks the method worked, and they finally arrived in his world. But stepping outside, they notice unusual emptiness. They manage to open a car and drive to his house. The door is opened by a haggard Daniela. She says Jason was taken to the hospital and the deceased, Charlie, lies in his room. The man runs outside, encountering a medical patrol. A female doctor goes inside, while another doctor performs a rapid test on Jason. The returning doctor says hospitals are full, and Daniela is better off dying at home. The end is near. The virus spreads through body fluids, so Jason should avoid touching Daniela. She gives him several morphine injections, advising him to ease his wife's passing. Amanda tries to keep him from entering the house, reminding him that this is not his world and not his wife. But Jason returns. They reminisce about good moments that turn out to be very similar in both worlds. Then the woman takes the syringe. Jason and Amanda return to the container. The woman reminds him that they were talking about Jason's mother's illness. That's why they ended up in a world dying from a pandemic. The pair continues on. They arrive in a world that, at first glance, doesn't differ from Jason's. Meanwhile, Jason too apologizes to his wife for the unilateral decision to buy their son a car. The woman points out that such things are becoming more frequent. Her husband seems to be distancing from her, even missing the gathering at the tree. He tells her about Layton, who will pay huge sums for his discoveries. Jason enters his house, but upon hearing voices upstairs, he grabs a knife from the kitchen. Daniela screams in fear upon seeing him, and Charlie rushes into the room. They both act as if they are mortally afraid of Jason. The woman grabs the phone and tells emergency services that her arrested husband has come to her with a knife. Charlie shouts at him to leave. Frightened, Jason exits the house as a siren sounds in the distance. Amanda takes him to her friend, but the friend is horrified. In this world, Amanda is dead, and the friend mourns her deeply. Amanda tells her that she is in a better world and then takes the car keys. They drive to the container. In Jason 2's world, the container opens, and he steps out, retrieving backpacks with drugs. A lab assistant who rushes out tells him about his double's appearance and his escape with Amanda. Jason too returns to the corridor, where he hands doses to Leighton. He then informs him that he will have to seal this world. Daniela from Jason's original world starts painting, and her husband's double is thrilled, suggesting she leave the gallery and focus solely on painting, especially since the deal with Leighton is sealed. Later he picks up their son and treats him to ice cream with nuts, not knowing the boy is allergic to them. Daniela can't understand how he could forget such a thing. Then she notices injection marks on his arms. In the evening, he uses dental floss, something he has never done, and Daniela becomes increasingly puzzled. Jason 1 and Amanda continue searching for his world, but they keep finding discrepancies. A different door color, a dog's presence, the absence of the memory tree, and similar things. Amanda suggests they rest at a hotel and have dinner at a normal cafe. Over the meal, they laugh a lot and then dance. At night, Jason hugs Amanda but stops, realizing they are not together. Jason too visits a psychotherapist who turns out to be Amanda's double. He talks about his relationship with Daniela and the disappointments he has faced. She suddenly reminds him that expectations can be overly high. Daniela complains to her friend Blair about his strange changes, and Blair advises her to keep an eye on her husband. In the evening, Jason asks his wife to wear a new dress and takes her to the gallery where he has hung her painting. Instead of gratitude, Daniela is horrified and asks to be taken home. She is very angry about his unilateral action, which she feels has humiliated her. Jason admits he never really knew her and is trying to make her happy against her wishes. Leaving his wife at home, he drives away, unaware that she is following him. Soon, they arrive at a warehouse where Daniela sees a locker her husband uses. Waiting for him to leave, she takes out a couple of vials lying on the floor. Later, she gives one to Ryan, asking him to analyze the drug. Meanwhile, Jason 1 finds the Daniela of this world. She also runs a gallery but doesn't recognize him during their conversation. Amanda also finds her double, but here the woman is married and has a son. At night, Jason goes to his house and watches his wife embrace his copy. Amanda, in the meantime, describes her ideal world. When Jason returns, a quarrel ensues because Amanda loses faith that they will find his world, as they only have 10 vials left. Ryan accuses Jason too of stealing his research, as the drug in his vial is identical to his own. Jason too takes his friend to the container. He injects the drug into himself and Ryan ends up in the corridor with doors to other worlds. Realizing he is in a quantum state, he is thrilled. Jason explains how to tune into another reality, and upon opening a door, Ryan sees a fantastically beautiful Chicago. This world is kinder and more progressive because Jason made it so for his friend. He asks for Ryan's phone to take a picture of him and steps back to the door. Ryan realizes this is not his friend. Jason just closes the door, leaving the man in another world. Later, he sees that Daniela is calling Ryan. Then Leighton's men arrive and pack up the container. Sometime later, a detective comes to Jason's house, investigating Ryan's disappearance. The couple tells her about their last encounters with the friend, and Jason too suddenly states that Ryan drank a lot, although he never drank alcohol. After this, Daniela shows him the remaining vial and confesses she has been following him. He explains that Ryan made the drug for Jason 2's research because he is reviving his project. Amanda leads Jason 1 into a world she has imagined. This Chicago is beautiful. They walk through a clean and cozy city, enjoying friendly faces. They drink cocoa from edible cups and then have a snack in a cafe where they learn about a trendy restaurant in the tallest tower in the city. Amanda leaves, setting up a meeting with Jason there. A nearby couple gives him a photo they took, admiring them. Later, Jason goes to the restaurant and sees Amanda in an evening dress. She gives him a suit she bought for him, and he changes and joins her. Jason gives her her favorite candies, which exist in this world. She laughs, saying he is an insurance agent here. Her double in this world disappeared 2 years ago. Taking advantage of their identical appearance, Amanda made a passport and gained access to the double's savings, so she decided to stay here. She invites Jason to join her, but he declines. Before leaving, Jason secretly places 2 of the remaining vials in her purse. Amanda cries in the elevator, but, seeing the sun, wipes her tears and heads into a new life. Jason goes to the container. He has only 3 vials left, and the next world is destroyed. He continues, and in the next reality, he calls his wife. She is surprised, as she just saw him off to work, but Jason confesses his love to her. At night, he sneaks into his house and sees Daniela hugging his copy, but going down to the kitchen, he encounters his son, and it is not Charlie. It turns out that here they managed to save Max by transplanting the heart of a deceased girl, and now he suffers from guilt. Jason 1 comforts him. Meanwhile, Jason 2 confesses to the psychotherapist Amanda that he wants to pack up and leave his wife. Then suddenly he tells very personal things about the doctor herself. She kicks him out, but outside, Jason 2 is met by a detective. They tracked Ryan's phone and know that after the bar, he went to the industrial part of the city, so she intends to check all the cameras located there. Jason 2 goes to the container and breaks the formwork. He finds Ryan's double in the first world, where he works as a simple mechanic, gets him drunk, brings him to his world, cleans him up, and puts him to sleep in Ryan's bed. Jason 1 takes out the last vial and writes in Blair's diary his memories of the first meeting with Daniela. He saw the living Max and even thought of treating his double in that world as he had been treated. But he realized he only wants his family, his home, and his life. Jason 1 opens the door and finally arrives in his world. He heads home, checking all the details along the way, but upon approaching the house, he sees himself telling Daniela that he found Ryan in a wild drunken state. He had to clean his friend up and take him home. Jason 1 goes to a store to buy a gun, but without a permit, he buys pepper spray and a hunting knife. A minute later, Jason 2 enters the same store and repeats his double's actions. The stunned shop assistant remarks that they were just discussing buying a gun. She asks if he has a twin brother. Realizing his prototype has returned, Jason 2 runs outside but finds no one. Friends, if you've watched this far, pay closer attention because the most confusing part of the plot is about to begin. He returns home where Charlie informs him that Mom went to Ryan, who is behaving very strangely. Jason 2 goes outside and is attacked by another Jason in a hat, whom he kills in a fight. Meanwhile, Ryan, seeing Daniela, claims that he is an auto mechanic and repairs her car in his world, not a scientist-chemist. He recalls a man offering him alcohol and recognizes Jason from a photo. Jason checks his gear and stepping into the hallway encounters himself, but the double runs away, and Jason gives chase. At this time, Jason 2 loads the body of the killed double into a car, and Jason 1 catches up with his double in a bar. They realize that their copies multiply in a container, and it's unclear how many there could be, but they all aimed for this particular Chicago, as their prototype was desperate to get home. Amanda appeared in all realities. Only in one did she die in a terrible world. And for Jason 1, she remained in the best world. Both are out of vials and cannot help each other. Jason 3 suggests getting rid of the one who caused all this. Jason 2 doesn't know about the place where they both love to rest. They need to lure the villain there and kill him. Besides, Jason 3 has already dug a grave there, and he also has a gun. The next morning, Jason 1 goes to the bar, where he lights a cigar despite the strict prohibition. He is taken to the police station. Meanwhile, Daniela plans to take her husband's large car to move some things to the gallery, but he rudely forbids her. And Jason 2 drives his son to the university, showing him memorable places on the campus when he notices Jason 3 watching them. Daniela goes to the storage box again and breaking the doors, finds bags with unknown currency, a box of vials, and Ryan's jacket. But then she gets a call from the police. Jason 2 guides Charlie through the building and their pursuer loses sight of them. The father asks his son to take the car and meet him at another exit, even though he doesn't have a license yet. Confused, Charlie leaves, and Jason 2 tries to throw Jason 3 off his trail, but he also knows the university building well. Eventually, the men engage in a fight, and the second Jason wins. Charlie makes a failed maneuver, attracting a policeman's attention, and Jason 2 knocks out the third and locks him in a toilet stall. Meanwhile, the policeman demands Charlie's license, but at that moment, Jason 2 appears, managing to persuade the officer to let them go. At this moment, Daniela sees her husband at the station. It turns out Jason was looking for a place where they could talk safely. He tells his wife the truth, but she doesn't believe him. Then Jason suggests calling him. Daniela dials her husband's number, and Jason answers. She hangs up, then Jason asks her to call again and remind him of their great vacation in Miami, though they never actually went there. Daniela does this, adding made-up details about the vacation, and that Jason agrees, pretending to remember the trip. Now Daniela believes her real husband, who says there are other versions of him. They agree on a code word in a meeting place, and Daniela goes to get their son. But at home she finds her husband, Jason 2, who orders her to pack because they need to leave urgently. The mother tries to talk to her son, but Jason 2 is on guard and doesn't let them do it. The woman leaves supposedly to get a suitcase and messages Charlie. The boy leaves first, and Daniela lures her husband into the basement and pushes him down the stairs. They drive away, but another car with yet another Jason behind the wheel cuts them off. Daniela realizes this is another version of her husband. At this moment, they are rammed by a car driven by yet another Jason. Daniela and Charlie flee. Soon they reach the place where Jason 1 is waiting for them. He says the code word and hugs his son. Meanwhile, Jason's family leaves the city. Suddenly, Daniela and Charlie start receiving messages from numerous other Jasons, assuring them that only they can protect them. The woman turns off the gadgets. Her husband can't choose a place where they can hide, as the other Jasons might also guess where to look for them. Then Charlie takes over and shows the way to a friend's vacant house. Charlie is puzzled by the number of fathers, as, theoretically, they all are his father in some way. Jason suggests they sleep first and then make decisions. Daniela sympathizes with his adventures, but those other Jasons are suffering too. The woman goes to bed, while Jason checks his email and suddenly sees an entire chat of 44 Jasons arguing over who gets Daniela and Charlie. In the morning, Jason finds his wife on the beach. She admits that at first, she liked the new Jason, but gradually she realized he wasn't the one she loved. Her husband tells her he sometimes thought about a new life. Apparently Jason too also thought about this, so he moved to their world. He recalls Daniela number 2, who became an artist, lived in a luxurious apartment, and had lots of friends. Jason 3 also studies the chat, trying to figure out where his double went. Suddenly he gets a message from Blair asking to return the car. He realizes Daniela borrowed a car from a friend and asks her to come urgently. At this time, Jason tells his wife about the chat, and one of them suggesting to raffle her and Charlie in a lottery. Jason too questions the third about what happened to him in other worlds. He tells about the death of Daniela and Ryan and the suffering of Amanda, who loved that Jason very much. In the reality of the third Jason, she died in the forest, impaled by a giant tree branch. Jason too begins to understand the horror of his actions, as he hoped to make his double happy with a new life. Meanwhile, Charlie prepares breakfast and tells Jason the latest news from their life, deciding where to go next. At this time, Blair arrives at their house and finds Jason 3 tied up in a closet. The third attacks her and demands to track her car, but Blair manages to neutralize him and demands to tell her the truth about the ongoing madness. Jason tells his wife and son about other realities. They are amazed that their doubles live in a few microns away, unseen by them. Jason admits that there was one world where he almost stayed but couldn't imagine life without his family. Later, Daniela reads his chat. They spend the night together, reminiscing about their first meeting. She admits she made a choice and informed the other Jasons, but later Jason suddenly sees a shadow outside the window, and going outside finds an injured double, who says he was hit by one of them. There are many of them here, and it won't end just like that. Gunshots are heard in the dark, and Jason asks his wife to run to their son, but then another armed double calls out to him, demanding his clothes and the code word. Jason 1 charges at him. A fight ensues, but a shot rings out, and the double falls. It turns out to be Jason 2, who realized his guilt. He asks for their forgiveness, gives them car keys, and asks them to leave. The family drives into the night while the second Jason shoots back at the other doubles, giving them a chance to escape. Here they find a suitcase with a device for traveling between worlds in the car and a phone with a recorded message, in which Jason 2 admits that he entered the container full of regret about the world where the family he didn't create lived, and now he offers to find them a new home in another world. The family heads to the container, where they are met by dozens of Jason doubles who understood that the woman made a choice and came to say goodbye. The family walks into the container through the line of Jasons. There, they trust Charlie to choose a new world where they will all be happy. Charlie opens the door and steps into another reality, followed by his parents. This concludes the first season.